My name is Fred, and this is my story. A story about a marriage in trouble. As marriages go, we seem to have a good one. Wilma and I had been married almost 25 years. Our daughter Nancy was in her last year of college, and we were both excited and happy because she had already landed a job after graduation. She had studied accounting and had done quite well, and was starting in the Washington, D.C. area. We lived in Richmond, and would only be a couple of hours away. As mentioned, Wilma and I had been together since our last year at college. We met, dated, and fell in love. Nothing very extraordinary about it, but I always felt she and I were soulmates. At least I thought so anyway. I am average and on the thin side, about 5'10", and weigh about 170. She was a beauty as far as I am concerned. Wilma had beautiful curly red hair and had a proportional figure. She was about 5'5", and had gorgeous green eyes. She was very sweet and somewhat shy. She told me she did not date much because she wanted to make good grades and did not think partying and getting drunk was conducive to her. I was a bit more of the partying type, not overdoing it but fully enjoying the college experience. I was also more outgoing, but she and I fit together just perfectly. I had 2 other girlfriends before Wilma, one in high school and one in college. One thing about Wilma, which everyone said, was that she was very kind and sweet. I found that true too, except because of her Irish temper. She could dish it out pretty well, if she thought she was right. I had been on the other side of that temper a few times, and I usually backed down as she dug in her heels about something. Through the years, we both developed into our daily rituals. I worked in retail at a department store, and she worked in the city codes department. She was very diligent and had been there over 20 years. She worked there when she first got out of college, and then stayed home for our daughter's first 5 years. She resumed her career. Dealing with the city had its ups and downs, but generally, she liked it. My career was also improving as I had entered the workforce right out of school. We had moved back to our hometown and enjoyed it there. I had offers at other locations, but Wilma did not want to leave as her mother still lived in the area and was getting older. My parents had both passed away. The losses were difficult as both had died of cancer, and it had happened rapidly. It was a big loss for me, but Wilma, my daughter, and her mother were there for me. She loved my parents as well, and it was a loss for her too. I suppose when you have been married for a while, you tend to take each other for granted. That was probably the case for each of us as our daughter had gone to college and was getting ready to move away permanently. I felt this was a good time to start getting back the special times Wilma and I had had when we were first married. I had started to take Wilma out for a weekly dinner date. Our love life had become somewhat stale, and I thought this would wake up our love again. Now, after listening to so many stories about philandering wives, and some of the clues something is not right, I never had the slightest idea she would ever put our marriage in trouble. She always did the right thing as far as we were concerned. As I mentioned, I gave her freedom to do as she felt was appropriate, and she always did the right thing. I was the one who paid all of the bills, and she was the cook and handled all of the household things. We had always been a great partnership, and when she wanted to buy something, she asked, and I did too, if it was a large purchase. We always discussed it first. As anyone who works in retail at Christmas, we worked unbelievable hours. I was assistant manager of the store, and it was not unusual to work 60 hours per week. Wilma, on the other side, did not work as much during the holiday time as she usually had saved up some days off to use at the end of the year. Also, every year, her department at the city had a Christmas party, and all of the spouses were included. Even though Christmas was busy, I always made an appearance at her party, just to meet and get to know her colleagues. Starting in the fall, Wilma had started to become a little more aloof. Nothing dramatic, but just a little distant. As a man who had been married so long, I just dismissed it. However, she started not being interested in any romance. She did not feel like going out on our weekly dates, or if she did, she would not watch the movie or care about going out at all. Our love life had slowed down from 1 to 2 times weekly to 1 to 2 times monthly. It had happened slowly, and even though I still loved our time together, she seemed less interested. She blamed menopause and too much work, but something just was not right. I occasionally had to travel for work and had to go to the corporate office. Then, in October, I was scheduled to go for a week. Wilma usually hated me to travel, and she did not like being alone. However, this time, she simply said okay. That made me take no notice. Her being aloof and her not caring about spending time with me. I asked her repeatedly, was she feeling all right? She nodded and said that work was busy and she was tired. I told her to go to the doctor. She said she would. As I prepared to go away for my trip, she told me to have a nice time and behave myself. I laughed and said that was a joke because the meetings were long and boring. It was mostly just all the new ideas for the Christmas season being introduced. It was more like a school than anything fun. I thought it was odd that she asked me to behave because I never gave her a reason for her to believe I would not. As I thought it through, the more I thought about her actions as well as her words, something was obviously wrong. I asked her if everything was fine, and she said yes. I told her I would miss her, and she said it was only going to be 5 days. She always hated sleeping alone. Oh my God, maybe she was not going to be sleeping alone. I watched her very closely over the weekend. My flight was out on Sunday afternoon, and I would arrive back at about dinner time on Friday. I called a couple of her friends and asked if she had told them anything, that something was wrong. Her friend Beth, who was her closest, said she seemed tired, but she had not told her anything else. I also knew Sally, one of her coworkers. I asked Sally if anything at work had changed for Wilma. Sally was silent for a minute, and I repeated myself. Then Sally said we have a new manager in our department, and he had implemented new rules, and everyone was busier. I thought that was interesting that she never mentioned that to me. I asked when the manager arrived, and what was his name. She hesitated and said he had only been there for a couple of months. She did not say his name, so I asked again. Sally told me she did not want to get involved. I was stunned. Sally, please tell me what is going on. I am very worried about Wilma. Sally reluctantly said his name was Barney Rubble, and he is a big man and very intimidating. Sally, please, should I be worried about this man? How old is he? She said he is about 35 and handsome, and 6'3", and over 200 pounds. He played football in college. I was now worried. Sally, please tell me, how is he acting toward Wilma? Sally simply said he seems to like her, and they go out to lunch at least once a week, but I have not seen anything else. I was not very happy to hear the news, but I told Sally I appreciated her info. Sally, one more thing, please. I know Wilma is your friend, but please tell me if anything seems out of character for Wilma. Please, I need to know. I will never tell her you told me anything. Sally said she would try. That was not exactly a ringing endorsement. Now I was in full worry mode. Should I try to confront Wilma and ask, or find out some more information first? I was leaving in 2 days, and I needed to know more. I started doing a little research about Barney. I found some information about him that was released by the city as a new hire. He had come from Charlotte. Apparently, he was not married and had 2 sons. Next, I looked around to find out where he lived. I found that he lived in a neighborhood about 5 miles away. It was nice but similar to ours. I was trying to remember if anyone I knew lived near him. Maybe they could keep an eye on him while I was away. Saturday approached, and I was trying to do some detective work and find out more about Mr. Rubble, the handsome football player. I wish Sally hadn't told me he was handsome or intimidating. That worried me. My wife, who was more of a follower, might just follow this stud to his bed. I know I have never had a reason to believe Wilma would be unfaithful, but I was just worried by her recent actions. I also called our daughter and asked if she noticed anything different about her mom. She said about the same as I did, that she seemed a little detached but nothing bad. I asked her if she could call her, and just probe about her job or how things were going without raising suspicions. I tried to tell Nancy that I was simply worried about her job and nothing about her boss. She told me she would call me back after she talked. I continued to plan. If she was in the early stages, I may be able to stop it or at least keep it from going further. I did some yard work and tried to keep busy. I had my cell phone in case anyone called me. Wilma came out and said she was going to go shopping. I asked if it would be with anyone. She said no and would be back soon. After she left, I decided to see if I could get into her computer. As I was working on it, Nancy called and said she asked Mom straight out if anything at work was causing her some problems. She said she had some issues and they should be resolved soon, but would not elaborate. She also asked her mom if anyone at work was part of the problem, and she answered that it would be taken care of as well. That did not give me much to go on, but I had to find out more. As I attempted to get into her computer, she had changed all of the settings, and I could not get into it. This just added to my worries. It appeared that she had deleted all of her old sent messages, as well as cleaning out her deleted box. I wish I could get into her cell phone, but she kept that like she was attached at the hip with it. As I was starting to get some of my clothes ready for the trip, then it struck me. I should take a drive to Rubble's house and just drive by to see if she decided to run over there. Wilma was dressed normally as if she was going shopping, but that may not have meant anything. It only took about 15 minutes to get there, and I tried to just drive by and see what kind of car he drove and get his license plate number. As I pulled down his street, I was watching, and there was a car in the driveway. I was not sure what type of car he had, but as he had only been on the job for a few months, and the car's plates were from North Carolina, I thought this must be his car as he had come from Charlotte. He drove a Lexus. I thought the city must pay its department managers well. Wilma was an assistant department manager and was pretty well paid. I made a bit more than she did, but not a lot. Well, not seeing another car, I drove on and came back home. As I got there, my neighbors stopped me outside, and we just chatted about the neighborhood. Tom Butcher was the crime watch captain and was informing me of any activity. Fortunately, everything had been quiet recently. As I was getting ready to go inside, I told him I would be out of town for the week and to please keep an eye out for us. Wilma would be home alone, and I would appreciate him checking in from time to time. He said he would, and I went inside. Once inside, I started a wash for any clothes I might need on my trip. I usually washed my underwear with Wilma's to make a full load. I started looking in the hamper and found some sexy new bras and panties I have not seen before. Once again, everything is starting to add up to a major problem in our marriage. Now, as most men, when I see something new, my wife will laugh and say she has had that for a year. And I never noticed before. I was positive I had not seen it before. I did check the panties to see if anything was left in it. It just looked regular to me, and I washed them. Wilma knows that I love black and red lingerie and have given it to her in the past, and she pretty much almost never wore it. Now I see both and wondered when she decided to wear it. About this time, I heard the front door open, and she walked in and came upstairs. I asked if her shopping was a success, and she said she really did not find much, but there was a sale at the mall. As I work at a department store, I get an employee and spouse discount, and she usually enjoys it. This time she mentioned she didn't find anything. I asked if she went where I worked, and she said she wanted to try some new places. I just shook my head. At dinner that night, the conversation was very quiet. I was thinking about my situation, and I think she was too. Both of us on opposite sides. Wilma was a wonderful cook and always made delicious meals. Lately, she had started to just get more prepared food to serve. Sometimes, when we were both busy, it was fine, but she had not been as busy lately. I told her I had to go to the store and get some allergy medicine as I suffer with it during the fall and spring. Did she need anything, and I would get it. She gave me a small list of items, such as paper towels and toilet paper and other things. I told her I would be back soon. As I left with a grin on my face, I told her I would love to spend some time with her that night, as I will miss her for the next few days. Her response was typical lately, and she told me she planned to turn in early as she was sleepy and did not sleep well the night before. So much for romance, or even the idea of cuddling. I was amazed and disappointed. My wife was nothing more than a roommate to me. What the heck was happening? When I returned from the store with the items and I was unpacking them, she complained about everything. I got the wrong toilet paper and the wrong paper towels, and on and on. I knew what this was. She was trying to start an argument so that we would not be having any romance. I was speechless. When in the world did my loving wife turn into this? She was deliberately trying to start a fight so she could justify her actions while I was away. I simply shook my head. As was expected, shortly after dinner, she went upstairs and was reading a book. When I jumped in the shower and was dressing into my pajamas, she told me she was very tired and would be turning in soon. It was 8:30. I simply went downstairs and watched a football game. I ended up sleeping on the couch that night, as it seemed silly to go to bed with an angry wife who was trying to start fights just so she would not have to interact with me in any way. I woke up early Sunday morning, fixed the coffee, and was reading the paper when she came down later. Sometimes we went to church, but with her attitude, I had no idea if she wanted to go or not. She promptly dressed and said we would have to leave soon, so I needed to get dressed if we were to be on time. So I did get dressed and was ready in a few minutes. We went to church, and she acted like my wife of old, being sweet and cordial to everyone. I was hoping the Reverend would talk about fidelity, but no such luck. When the service was over, we greeted everyone and headed home again. On the way home, she pretty much ignored me. As we pulled into the driveway, she left the car, and I was going to bring our garbage cans around for Monday morning pickup. She yelled at me to hurry and open the door, as she forgot to take her keys to the house. I opened the door for her and finished my garbage duty. Once inside, she was fixing a sandwich for herself and was starting to eat. Normally, she would ask if I wanted something, or she would fix something for both of us. I proceeded to undress and get into jeans and a sweatshirt. Then I went and made myself a sandwich too, and ate in front of the TV. As I glanced at Wilma, she was casually reading the paper. Then her cell phone rang, and she picked it up and left the room. No words had been spoken in the time I entered the house. After lunch, I went and got out all of our clothes that I had washed. I folded it and brought it upstairs to our bedroom. I folded Wilma's lingerie and left it on the bed, and I started to pack my suitcase for the trip. When she came up later, I wanted her to know that I had not only seen her lingerie and had folded it for her. Her only comment was, "I hope you washed it on gentle," because she would hate to have all of her clothes ruined by my incompetence. I turned and was about to explode. I was angry and about to tell her what she could do with her new panties and bras, but she left the room. I packed and was getting ready to go. Wilma saw me bring my suitcase and carry-on bag and place it by the door. She complained that now she had to take me to the airport and give up her Sunday afternoon. Usually, she was happy to drive me, and we chatted about how we would miss each other. This time I knew I would never be happy again with this woman. I told her, "Never mind, I will drive myself, and have a wonderful week." I was sure she had made plans and could not wait until I was gone. I drove myself and left the house without saying goodbye or our usual kiss. The trip to Chicago was uneventful, and I checked into my hotel room. I was the only one from my particular store there, and it gave me a chance to meet other people and discuss business. As much as I hated to travel, meeting others was good and rewarding as we shared ideas. I usually gave my wife a call to tell her I was safe, but I didn't. What was the point? She was no longer mine anyway. I did call my daughter and told her I was away for a few days and to reach me on my cell if she needed anything. I never heard a word from Wilma. I was quite sure she was happy to be away from me. We had a decent dinner, and I met others from all over the country. I was tired and needed a good night's sleep as I had not slept much the last few nights. I woke up once in the middle of the night and burst into tears. I had held all my emotions inside, and I finally let it all out. I was so glad I was alone because I knew my marriage was over. Unless Wilma decided I was significant again in some form, I could not live like this. I cried about my daughter spending each holiday with one parent and then the other. I cried for all of the years we had shared together, mostly very happy. I finally went back to sleep and got up to start the week of meetings. I checked my cell, and no messages or texts from Wilma. Nothing. Talk about a kick in the gut. Absolutely nothing from my supposedly loving wife. The week went by with my meeting, and I slowly started to formulate a plan to extricate myself from my marriage. It was obvious that she was gone, and I would never get her back. I called my attorney and spoke to him about my situation, and he said he could prepare some documents if I wanted. After much discussion, he said it would probably be a 50-50 split pretty much. I made just a little more than she did, and with our daughter almost out of school, there would not be any more college expenses as they had already been taken care of. I was reluctantly satisfied with starting the procedure to end this sham of a marriage. Amazingly, all of this happened within a few weeks. Also, I still had no evidence she was cheating physically yet, but she was very much emotionally cheating as I was cut off from her life. Next, I checked all of our accounts. I paid many things online, and my wife had never even seen anything about our accounts. She usually didn't care at all. She did not know what we had in our retirement accounts and only paid for whatever she wanted to buy. Now I felt at least I was taking back my life. As the week progressed, I decided to call Tom, my neighbor, to see if he had noticed anything going on in the neighborhood. He informed me that a car was picking up my wife every morning and dropping her off every evening. I asked what type of car was it. He said it was a Lexus. I laughed and said thanks for the info, Tom. My neighbor had always been a bit nosy, but now I was very happy for his intrusion. I asked a big favor. Could he tell me how long the car was parked in my driveway? I was blunt and told him some of my worries. He said he would be happy to, as he himself had been involved in a nasty divorce a few years prior. On Thursday, I spoke to my boss back in Richmond and asked if I could leave that evening as something had come up at home. He agreed, as most of the final meeting on Friday was simply a wrap-up of the week. I got an early evening flight back and called Tom again. He said the car was parked overnight, and he had a couple of photos with timestamps on it. I told him I owed him, and he said no problem. I also told him I was coming in late tonight and planned to see what was happening. He was retired and would probably be there if he could do anything for me. I thanked him and told him I would park down the street and see him first and then go home. As I was flying back, I was deeply concerned about what would happen when I got home. I knew my marriage was over, but I was still so shocked by Wilma. How could a loving wife turn into a complete thoughtless, uncaring person in a matter of a few weeks? Finally, I got off the plane and went and found my car. I checked my phone again and saw nothing from my wife. My daughter had called, and I called her back. She said she had tried to reach her mom, but she never answered on her cell or our home phone. She even left a message for her to call. I pulled into my street and slowly walked up the street. There were no cars parked in front of my house. It was about 8 o'clock in the evening, and I thought maybe Wilma's car was in the garage. But since only one car could fit in the garage, at least rubble wasn't there. I went to my neighbor's. Tom answered the door and invited me in. He told me that the car was there all night. It had parked on the street, but right in front of my house. So much for being discreet. He said he saw them leave about 6 o'clock and had not returned that he knew. I was wondering if they went to his house or were just out to dinner. I then decided maybe I should drive over to Rubble's house. Tom suggested I move my car to the street behind ours, as when they came back, they might notice it being parked nearby. I agreed. He thought I could go over to the other house, but thought that they would return because if they were spending the night at his house, she would have taken some clothes. Tom mentioned they looked like they were just a happy couple as they were holding hands as they stepped in the car. He apologized after he said it, and I told him not to worry about it, because my marriage was over anyway. Now I had to wait. I called my attorney and told him I was back in town. He informed me he had the papers drawn up. It was a pretty even split. We would each keep our own retirement programs and split the house evenly after it is sold. We each would get some of the equity built up in it. We had been there almost 18 years and had a fair amount of about $100,000 each once it was sold, provided she did not contest it. I told him I would be amazed if she would contest unless she tried to get a better deal. He said he could have it ready to serve on Monday morning. I had a lot to do, but there was no way I could keep a lid on this until Monday. I needed to get to the bank and distribute the funds as well as the joint accounts and credit cards. It wasn't a lot of different accounts, but in the interest of fairness for the 24 years together, we had to do it. The last few weeks had destroyed any goodwill left for me. The most difficult thing was to call Nancy and tell her. I decided I had to wait until I confronted them to see what was going on first. As I waited, Tom could see I was extremely nervous, and he told me to sit down and relax, and he would get some coffee. He told me about his time in the Army and how waiting was a big part of the discipline. I appreciated hearing his perspective, and he calmed me down as we waited. We were in his living room and facing my house across the street. It was dark, and when we saw a car come down the street, he went over and watched. He told me to sit tight and then wait until they had come back, and we will see what they do. Finally, about 8:30, a car pulled out front of the house. Out stepped Wilma, and then this big man walked around and put his arm around her as they walked to the door. Tom had an excellent camera and took pics of them as they went inside the house. Then he turned to me and asked me what I wanted to do. Did I want to see them or wait until he leaves and confront Wilma by herself? As tomorrow was Friday, they would have to go to work and then see what happens. I decided to wait a few minutes and then sneak into the house. Tom suggested I call my attorney and see what he recommended. I did and told him I was going into my house and my wife and her lover were there. He told me maybe it would be better if I waited until he could get a PI there to go in with me to prevent any possible violence or anger to ensue. I told him it would take too long. I wanted to see them so I could prove once and for all and get some pics. He said not to do that, but I was determined. He said the guy could react, and it could degenerate into a huge confrontation. I told him I did not care at this point. I had to see it. I told him I had to go. I turned to Tom and told him I was going in, and in a few minutes, I wanted to catch them in a compromising position, not just talking but doing. Tom told me he would go too, and I said no, I could handle it. He said wait a minute and left the room. He came back with a handgun. He said just for defensive reasons. He told me he was at least going to stay outside the house in case something happened with his camera and phone. I said I appreciated it, and we went over. I looked at the clock. It was about 9 o'clock. I watched and saw it was dark in the upstairs bedroom. I peeked in and saw them in the living room. He was kissing Wilma very passionately. It took all my strength not to scream at him and Wilma. My heart broke, but I watched. If they continued in the living room, others could see them from the outside. The curtains were partially opened. If someone was up close, they could see into it. Tom came over and took a couple of pictures with his camera. Rubble was towering over my wife. He was taking off his shirt, and he was built like a Greek god. Then he slowly dropped his pants, and he was down to his boxer shorts. Wilma just had this silly grin on her face like a kid on Christmas morning. What little hope I had left to save my marriage evaporated when Wilma stood up, and he took off her blouse and pants. She stood there in the red panties and bra that I'd admired when I washed them on Sunday. He then picked her up and carried her upstairs. When I saw the light go on, I moved to the back of the house and slowly unlocked the back door. I slowly went upstairs and stopped. I heard Wilma giggling and Rubble told her he was going to use her like his little toy. I turned on my video from my phone to listen to their comments and slowly peered around the door. It was open with a light on. They did not see me standing in the hallway, and I was filming it. He was naked, and I saw him from the back. Wilma was lying on our bed at the bottom of the bed. She was lying there, and I was hurt, angry, and almost numb. As I slowly peered in the doorway to get a better picture of Rubble, I could see him. He was with Wilma, and I saw lust in her eyes. He told her he was going to keep going until she begged him to stop. Finally, Wilma turned her head and saw me. I watched as her lust turned to horror as I stood there. Rubble turned and saw me and laughed, saying, "The chicken is here, and now you can see how a real man treats his wife." I stood there, and slowly my blood started to boil. I said in a loud voice, "Screw you and screw her. Nobody is coming in here and disrespecting me in my house, my bedroom, and with my wife." Rubble stopped for a minute, and then regained his bluster and said, "What are you going to do about it, you coward?" I responded, "Let me ask you a question. How big are you?" He said, "About 6'3", and weigh 225, and I have something you will never have." Then he laughed. The whole time this was going on, Wilma was wide-eyed and deathly quiet. I then said, "I bet you stay in shape. Do you run too?" He was surprised I was having a regular conversation with him, and he said, "Yeah, I run pretty well, and stay in good shape." "Well, you scum, can you outrun a bullet?" I pulled the gun out of my pocket. Wilma screamed, and he lost all his attitude and said, "Hey man, don't do anything stupid." I told him to kneel on the floor. "Do it now, you idiot." And Wilma, "Shut up." She just whimpered and shook. Now that I had their attention, I wanted to ask a few questions. By now, a calm had come over me, and I was feeling pretty good. First, who was the mental giant who decided to do this in my home, you or Wilma? Answer me, you piece off. We knew you were out of town and thought we would be more comfortable here. Wilma wanted to be here in case you called. Wow, that was brilliant. Now, next question. How many times have you done this with Wilma? Would you like to take that one? I smiled at her, and she just shook her head and wept. Well, cowboy, looks like it's for you to answer. Answer it well, or it might be your last. If you lie, we've done it 5 times. When was the first? Monday night was the first time, he said. I pulled the gun closer to his head. I swear it was Monday night. Please, Wilma, tell them. I'm begging you. Wilma was frozen but nodded her head. Wilma, is that right? Yes, that is right. I pulled the gun to the back of his head. Now, put your head on the floor and don't move. Well, your big attitude is a little bit shriveled up now, isn't it? Not feeling so cocky, are you? And I laughed at my own pathetic joke. How about if I put this gun up against your groin and pull the trigger? You won't die, but you won't be having fun any longer. Please, no, don't. I promise I won't ever touch her again. She wasn't even worth the effort. She is just plain old. Well, what do you say, Wilma? Is he good? I would assume he must have been because you did it 5 times, plus all of the lunches and make-out sessions you two must have had. Fred, please baby, I love you. I was just trying something new, and I am so sorry. It was exciting, but it was going to end soon, I promise. But you didn't answer my question. Did you like it? Well, did you? No, baby, it hurt, but I wanted to try it and see how it felt. It is over now, so we can be a couple again. I laughed and said, since you are not going to be with him again, is it okay if I shoot him where it hurts? He won't need it again. I cocked the hammer on the gun. All of a sudden, Rubble was begging. And well, let's just say he had an accident on the floor. Oh, poor baby. He had an accident. Sorry, buddy, but you made a mess on my carpet. What a piece of... Okay, you, get up and get dressed. I don't know what came over me, but I felt like I was regaining some self-respect. He slowly got up and started dressing. Now let me make a statement about this little incident. I have a little video and pics of you two doing and saying many things. If you do not want this released, I would keep this little intervention quiet. Do you both agree? Wilma nodded, and Rubble said, "Yes, I agree. Please don't release the video. Please." Wilma said, "Fred, I am so sorry. Please don't do that. Please, I will do anything for you." Rubble was dressed, and I asked him to leave, but I did mention, "Barney Rubble, please don't go fooling around with any more married women, okay?" He nodded and left. Now, I was left with my faithless wife, still undressed and crying. I told her to get dressed, and I would make some coffee, and we would talk. My good friend Tom was downstairs and told me he was proud of me and had listened to the whole conversation. I was surprised but thanked him. He told me he was backing me up because when he gave me the gun, it only had one bullet in it. He was prepared to intervene if needed. He was afraid I would hurt them both and make a mess. This way, one bullet would mostly stop the person. Then he shivered a little because he could have hurt me if I had missed. He grinned and said he was there before that happened. I thanked him, and he told me in spite of what she did, don't hurt her. You will be in jail, and your daughter needs you. Thanks again, Tom. A few minutes later, my lovely, unfaithful wife came down. I poured her some coffee, and we sat down. She tried to sit beside me on the sofa, and I got up and sat in the recliner, looking at her. "Well, what do you have to say for yourself?" Wilma answered, "I cannot even express how sorry I am, and for all I have done. You know me, I have never acted that way. I thought I knew you. Now continue." She cried and went on, "I got caught up in the thrill of a new adventure, and I thought you would never find out." I laughed and said, "You two were about as subtle as a freight train. You treated me despicably. Did you think I was dead, dumb, and blind? You know I loved you immensely, and my life for 24 years was wonderful because of you and Nancy. Then it appears you became obsessed and lost your mind. Okay, here is your chance to clean your soul and tell me everything. Any lies, and I am throwing you out now." As I was saying this, I was never taking her back. I was just trying to get her conscience to admit her mistakes. She cried and said she understood. "Fred, I have no excuses except I was swept up in the moment and let him take me. He was like a wild animal with fire and something I have never felt. You are so loving, caring, and kind. He was like a wild man who was going to take whatever he wanted." She paused, and I looked at her expressionless. I know it sounds so stupid, and I acted like a teenager on a first date. That was a heck of a date. 5 intimate sessions, plus many other gropes and touches. Plus, let's not forget the lunches. You also know your coworkers know about it too. They saw you two acting that way. She gasped. "Oh my God, I never thought they would." "Sorry, dear, they know." She cried some more. "I am so sorry for you and me. I have disgraced myself. I couldn't agree more, but you also humiliated me, and your disrespect and narcissism were awful. Everything was about you. I never thought anyone who supposedly loved me would treat me like that." I started to tear up. She saw me and rushed to me. I told her to sit still and leave me alone. "You have left me alone for weeks and showed no inclination about caring for me at all. Did you even realize you never called me when I was away for 5 days? You were so enraptured with your big lover that you forgot about the man who stood by you for over 24 years. Shame on you, Wilma. I would have bet anything on earth that you would love me until I died, for better or worse." And then I started to cry. I had held it together through all of this, and now I couldn't stop. I thought about all the future holidays. Next week was Thanksgiving. My poor Nancy was going to split all holidays, bouncing from parent to parent. Wilma had ruined it all. As much as I was angry at Rubble, she hurt me much more because of her lack of respect and love for me. In her eyes, I was weak because I put her welfare above mine. I sacrificed for her, nursed her when she was sick, and understood her feelings. I gladly put my own desires behind hers. She had been a wonderful wife and mother, and now it was all gone. Maybe I should have treated her poorly sometimes instead of caring about her feelings. She came to me again, and I pushed her away. She grabbed my legs and laid at my feet crying. I had to have this conversation for closure. I was not waiting for her to prepare some excuse that all cheaters use, like being lonely or needing to feel appreciated. I didn't care what he said, only what she did. My heart was breaking, but I was going to get better. Finally, after a few minutes, I told her to sit back down on the sofa so we could continue to talk. She continued to cry but sat back down. Wilma said, "Fred, I have lost everything. My self-respect, your love. I am heartbroken." "Wilma, do you love him? Do you want him? What are your plans?" "No, I don't think so. I was just in love with the idea of something new." I said, "You don't think so? So you are not completely sure whether you love him or not?" "No, Fred, I do not love him. It was the novelty of doing something I was not supposed to do. You know me, sweetheart. I have always been the good girl and done what everyone thought I should. Then Barney came along. I had never met someone who was so overpowering. I was under his spell. And his power, which you loved, and you know I could never give you," I said, shaking my head. "No, Fred, it was not his power. It was his intensity. He used it as a weapon." "Well, my dear, you let it happen. Are you going to report this or just accept it? Did you know it was wrong? What were you thinking? Rubble is just like the men you read about taking advantage of women. Except you gladly did it and traded me in like I was an old used car. Thanks for that." She broke down crying, saying, "No, no, no. He used me, and I enjoyed it. I am sorry. I didn't know how to stop myself." She continued crying and said she had not been adventurous in her lifetime and wanted to try new things. Like I proposed when we first became empty nesters. I bought toys and oils and outfits, and you refused them all. Why were you waiting for the right person to come along? We both sat in silence for a few minutes. I told her I needed a shower and would return to discuss this further. As I showered, I thought about all that had happened. I knew Wilma was sorry, but it was too fresh to make any decisions about our marriage. I wished I could have stayed in the shower for a week to cleanse my mind of all my thoughts. I still had intense hatred for Rubble, but was also happy that I did not hurt him. Tom had saved me from making a terrible mistake, and I didn't even know it. He was protecting me. Now I knew I had one friend who would be there for me. After the shower, I came downstairs and sat down again, looking at Wilma. She looked like she had been run over by a truck, lifeless and exhausted. The pain she was feeling was fresh, while mine had been building for weeks. Finally, she spoke. "Fred, I love you and always will love you. I know my actions do not seem like it, but I am completely distraught by what I did." I interrupted, "Wilma, stop it. I know you're sorry now, but suppose I was still in Chicago. What would you be doing right now?" She was silent. "Tell me, damn it, what would you be doing right now?" She hung her head and said, "I would be with Barney." "With Barney, really? I thought that was what we did. You know what I mean. I would be with him. At least you admit it. Now tell me what you two did. I know you were intimate, but I want details. This is the only way I will ever believe anything you say. If you lie to me now, I will know. Don't forget, I already have some facts." She nodded her head. "We fooled around, and I." She hesitated, then added, "And we were intimate. That was nice of you, considering you never wanted to do that with me. You thought it was gross, but with Barney, you were happy to do it. Did you enjoy it?" She shook her head. "No, I just did it because he demanded it. I don't understand why I let him treat me like that. He liked using me as his toy. But you enjoyed it. You should have seen your eyes when he was holding you. I have never, in 24 years, ever seen that look of lust in your eyes for me. How do you think that makes me feel?" She started crying again. "Honey, I love you, and you are so tender and loving. He was just a brute. He took me, and I am so ashamed. Let me ask you a question, Wilma. Do you know when we last were together? Wilma said nervously, a couple of weeks ago. No, it has been 4 weeks, about the same time you started seeing Barney. Did you even notice? We hadn't done anything at all. When we were together before that, were you thinking of him? She said, I didn't realize it at all. I am so sorry. I was so selfish and consumed that I missed it. No, I didn't think of him when we were together because we make love. He just took me. It was not the same. But you did like it. That was obvious. A couple of hours ago, all you could think about was being with him. Do you know how humiliating that is for me? She just shook her head and said, anything I can do to ease your pain, I will do. I never thought I could hurt someone so much. I have been terrible. Would you like to continue seeing him? He made you feel things I could never do for you, even if you let me try. What do you want from me? I want you, Fred. That is what I want. I find that incredible. You cannot change your feelings that fast. We both need a good night's sleep. I'm off work tomorrow, and we can see things better after some rest. We better go to bed. I got up, went to our room, and pulled out some things to take to my daughter's room. Wilma said, I want to sleep with you. I told her, our bedroom has been ruined by you and Barney. I doubt I will ever sleep there again. You should stay in there. There are some things you need to do tomorrow. Go to the doctor and get checked out. Barney probably fooled around with a lot of women before you, and you need to be tested for your own protection. If you were with him before we were last together, then please tell me, because I may need to get tested too. Did your lover convince you to be intimate in our bed? He was trying to demean me, and you enjoyed my humiliation too. Have a nice night. I slammed the door and went to bed. Wilma left and went to her room. I tossed and turned a lot, but finally drifted off to sleep. I got up at 7 o'clock. Wilma was in the kitchen already. She had made coffee and told me she took the day off. That scared me. I didn't want to listen to her all day. She made some breakfast, and we ate in silence. Finally, she said she would be tested for STDs. Also, she wanted to work through this with me. I told her, why do you want to do that? If you still want your lover and are discreet, you can continue. She looked at me in surprise and said, you want me to continue to see him? Don't you want to? He completely captivated you, and you loved it. You will still have to see him every day at work. Nothing has to change. You might as well continue being with him if it feels good. She was confused and didn't know what to say. Why are you saying that? I want to be with you. I think we should have a trial separation. That way, you can be with Barney, and I can be the happy, clueless husband. You get the best of both worlds, still being respected by friends and family, and not wasting your time on a sham marriage. Whenever we have to go to functions together, we can pretend like we are a happy couple, and then your lover can meet up with you afterward. Great opportunity for you. She started to cry as I got up to leave. Why does she care now about what I'm doing? She hasn't cared recently at all. I checked her phone while she was cleaning up the dishes to see if Barney had called her. No calls since last night, but that didn't mean she didn't contact him another way. My first order of business was to talk to my boss and explain everything. He was shocked and sorry about Wilma. He couldn't believe it. After talking about it, I told him I wanted to take the transfer to another store if possible. A new place and new job would be a pay raise, as well as getting me away from all the stress. He said he would look into it and see when we could make that happen. It might take a month or two. Next, I went to my attorney's office and spoke to him about my ideas. We would have a standard separation and proceed to a divorce, splitting mostly everything 50/50ths. I would move out of the house within a week and wait until I was transferred, then get on with my life. After speaking with the attorney, I went and changed all the accounts and canceled all the joint cards. I took out 50% of our savings and checking accounts. Then, I went to see our broker about some investments we had and tried to change them. Wilma would have to sign off on some of them, and she would get half, but it still felt good to make progress. I got some lunch and went to the park to walk for a while. I had my phone with me, and Wilma called to say she had her appointment at the doctor's office and would find out the results in a few days. I told her I would be there soon. I needed to speak to Nancy and let her know what was happening. But I wanted to wait until we had worked out some of the arrangements first. It made me cry to think about it. After walking and getting some fresh air, I left for home. It didn't feel like home anymore, just a house. When I walked in, Wilma had dressed up and looked nice. She was very nervous and told me we needed to move on and hopefully repair our marriage. Okay, dear wife, tell me what we can do. She wanted us to go to counseling. Also, she would limit her time spent with Barney, and we would make more time for us. I thought that was nice. Her focus was on repairing our lives and moving forward. I listened and acted like I cared what she thought. When she was finished, I asked, "Are you willing to turn over all your communications from your cell phone and your emails to him? I want to read them and see where we go from there." She didn't like that idea and said she had deleted them. How convenient. Why did you delete them? She said she didn't want me to see them. I wanted to start fresh and get rid of everything that reminded me of Barney. She thought that would make me happy. I told her I had a document for her to review. It was a separation agreement prepared by our attorney. If she wanted, she could have someone else review it. I would move out and get a temporary place, and I would continue to help with expenses. She could decide what she wanted to do once we were separated. I watched her think about this and waited for her response. She said she would rather we stay together and try to work this out. She loved me and thought we could get through this. I didn't think so. I also didn't tell her I was looking to transfer as soon as possible. She would never move, and I knew that. We spent the rest of the day working around the house. I raked the yard while she talked to her mother about Thanksgiving and having friends over to join us, as we usually did. I wasn't planning to participate this year, but I failed to tell her that. We ordered a pizza and sat in silence the rest of the weekend. I started getting things together to move out. She told me she didn't want me to move out and asked me to wait until after Thanksgiving to make a decision. I just nodded. The rest of the weekend progressed, and I continued sleeping in the other room. She asked if she could join me, and I told her no. We needed alone time. On Monday, I had asked for the day off, and Wilma didn't know it. She went to work, and I started moving to a temporary motel for a few days, waiting to hear about my transfer. My regional boss was looking at two options. Since I was the assistant manager, the store manager was involved too. He was a good friend and knew my move would benefit me financially, as well as getting me away from the toxic environment I was living in. Around lunchtime, I called Wilma's office and spoke to Sally. I could tell she was reluctant to speak to me, but I needed to know how Wilma was doing at the office. Sally noticed that Wilma had been very quiet and kept to herself. She also noticed that she had met with Barney in his office for about an hour. When she came out, she was nervous and went straight to her office. Sally said she peeked in, and it looked like Wilma had been crying. Sally asked what was wrong, but Wilma just said she had a rough weekend and that she and her husband were having a difficult time. Sally, being a friend, asked, "Does it have anything to do with Barney?" Wilma nodded, but didn't give any other details. I asked if Barney and Wilma were going out to lunch, but she couldn't tell because Barney had left 10 minutes ago, and Wilma had just left too. I thanked her and decided to call Wilma. After waiting a few minutes, I called her to see if she was with Barney. Wilma answered and said she was at lunch. I could hear noise in the background, like people talking, probably at a restaurant. I asked her if she was alone. She said she was only picking up lunch and would be returning shortly. I called Sally again and found out Wilma had only been gone for about 25 minutes, so maybe she was telling the truth. Sally also said that she went into Barney's office again for about 30 minutes. I thanked her and finished moving some clothes to my temporary home. Around 5 o'clock, I decided to go home and wait for Wilma to arrive so I could tell her I had moved out. When she arrived, I told her to sit down so we could talk. I told her I had moved out, and that we should live apart and see what happens next. I asked, "Wilma, what do you want?" She responded, "I think we should stay together and work it out. Maybe some time apart will help us rediscover if we want a marriage or just to move on." She was shocked. "No, I do not want a divorce. Not at all." I asked, "Since my confrontation with Barney, have you spoken to him?" She admitted she had. They were trying to figure out how to work together professionally, and nothing else. She didn't want to lose me. "Please, Fred, don't do this. Let's spend some time with the family over Thanksgiving. It could help us both." "Sorry, dear, but I love Nancy, and I think you still want Barney. It's too painful to be second best to my wife. We need to tell Nancy that we've separated. I'd better leave now, and I will be in touch." I hugged her as she cried and left. I settled into my motel and worked on some things. I had told Wilma she could call me if she needed to discuss anything important, but otherwise, we needed time apart. I slept terribly again. I reported to work, getting ready for the holiday season. It was very busy, which was good for me. After a long day, I returned to my room around 7 o'clock and saw a text from Wilma saying she loved me. My sarcastic thought was, "Who is Wilma?" Later, Wilma called, and I answered. She said Thanksgiving dinner would be at noon. She was excited because Nancy was coming home tomorrow, and they had about 10 people invited. Then she asked what time I would be there. I told her I wasn't coming. She was silent, then hung up the phone. Well, that went well. After that conversation, I called Nancy and told her that her mom and I had separated. She started crying, and I told her that her mom had been seeing someone. I didn't give details, but I had to tell her the truth. I didn't create this mess. Her mom did. Nancy begged me to come to Thanksgiving, but I told her I couldn't. I was too hurt. Instead, I planned to take her to dinner and see her over the weekend as much as possible. Work was going to be intense, as it was Black Friday. I usually reported to work around 5 a.m. and worked until almost 8 o'clock in the evening. Nancy begged me to get back with her mom, saying she would be crushed if I didn't. I wished I could have told her more, but I didn't feel up to it. Another night passed, and I slept poorly. I hoped to survive this holiday season. It was going to be the worst one I had ever had. Wednesday before Thanksgiving was always wild at the store as we prepared for everything. I worked for 12 hours, then went back to my little motel. I had received calls from both Nancy and Wilma. I called Nancy on her cell, and we spoke. She said she had spoken to Mom, who told her she had made a big mistake, but never stopped loving me. She wanted to see me and have me there tomorrow. I apologized and said I couldn't, but I really wanted to take her out so we could talk. She was angry at me for not trying to patch things up. I told her I would definitely speak to her, and we set up a time for dinner on Thanksgiving night. Next, I called Wilma. She was angry, expecting me to be there tomorrow, unless I hated my daughter and her. I told her that was ridiculous. I didn't feel welcome in a home where my wife entertained another man. I also asked if Barney was coming, and she hung up on me. I called her friend Beth and spoke to her. Beth had apparently spoken to Wilma, and Wilma told her I had left her. I asked Beth if Wilma told her why. Beth said Wilma told her I was angry about a coworker. Well, that was the understatement of the year. Beth and her family were coming over to our house tomorrow, and I told her I wouldn't be there. I told Beth that Wilma was seeing someone else, and I had caught her. She was shocked and couldn't believe it. I told her it was true, but I didn't want to ruin her Thanksgiving and wished her family a great day. Then I tried to sleep. I had to take some sleeping pills to finally get a decent night's rest. Thanksgiving morning was sunny and bright, and I was in a state of depression, alone, hurt, and angry. My room had a kitchenette, and I had bought a few groceries to get me through the day. I was looking forward to dinner with my Nancy, but otherwise, it was going to be a very quiet day. I dreamed of all the Thanksgivings in our past and started to cry. Life felt like a prison, but I had to move on and start over. I had the TV on all day to keep me company. At noon, I thought of all the people sitting down to big dinners as I ate my ham and cheese sandwich. Later, Nancy called and said she was coming over around 4 o'clock to spend time with me. I loved my girl so much. She was my reason for carrying on. When she arrived, I gave her a big hug and kiss, and we both started to cry. I held her for a long time before she sat down. Nancy told me she had stayed up half the night with her mom. Wilma had admitted to making a big mistake, but didn't give any details. Nancy had asked if she cheated, but Wilma only said she was wrong. I told Nancy I would tell her anything she wanted to know, outside of the explicit details. She understood. Nancy told me that her mom was a wreck and had cried for 2 hours. She dreaded seeing everyone without me being there. She also said that everyone at Thanksgiving was shocked when Wilma told them we were separated. Wilma didn't want to answer questions, but she was working toward reconciliation. Nancy said it was a subdued dinner. Wilma's mother was mad and planned to get to the bottom of things. I expected a phone call. Nancy and I had a nice dinner and talked about everything. School, boyfriends, life. She had a nice young man I had met, and maybe he was the one. As she said that, I felt both happy and sad. She couldn't wait to finish school and start her job. I told her I was requesting a transfer and asked her not to tell her mom yet, unless it went through. Nancy realized that her mom and I would never get back together because her mom would never move. I told her she and her mom were the only reasons keeping me in Richmond. I had lost her mom, and now she was moving. There was no one left here for me. Nancy kissed me and then left. Black Friday, I was in the store at 5:30. We opened at 7 o'clock. The day was wild with constant problems. 2 people didn't show up for work, a computer crashed, and there were a lot of complaints about being out of certain items. I felt like I was moving from one crisis to another, both in my personal and professional life. Finally, the day ended. I hadn't had a chance to look at my phone all day. When I got back to my room, I had about 10 messages. 1 from Wilma, 2 from Nancy, 5 from Wilma's mother, 1 from Beth, and 1 from the regional manager. I started with the manager. He had good news. The manager in Savannah was retiring, and he thought I would be a good replacement if I was interested. I told him I would love to talk about it with him. The position wouldn't be available until after the first of the year, and I understood that. I looked forward to our meeting. Next, I spoke to Nancy. She told me her boyfriend was coming to town on Saturday, and I told her I wanted to take them both out for a late dinner if possible. She said yes, and we planned to meet at 8 o'clock. Then, I called Wilma. She said she had a nice Thanksgiving, but everyone asked about me. I told her I hoped it was nice, and that I missed all the good food. She said it was my decision not to be there, and was angry that I told Nancy she had taken a lover. She said that wasn't true. I was her lover, and I was angry because of a mistake she had made. I told her not to sugarcoat her bad behavior, because I didn't create it. We talked a little more about Nancy, then hung up. Lastly, I spoke to my mother-in-law. She had always been very kind to me, and I had nothing but respect for her. I was very worried about calling, but I did. She wanted to know all the details, and I didn't leave anything out. She was a lovely Irish woman with a fiery side. I knew where Wilma got that from. I told her I had caught Wilma with someone else, and I was devastated. I poured out my feelings, and she listened. She told me not to make any rash decisions, and that she loved me and would be in touch. The amazing thing was, I used to have a very high libido, but since all of this started, I hadn't even thought about intimacy. I think I was humiliated, and it destroyed my self-esteem. At dinner with Nancy and Mark, we talked about the future. Mark asked, in front of her, if I would allow him the honor of her hand. She smiled, and I got teary-eyed. I agreed. Mark was a nice young man with a good future. They hadn't told anyone yet but planned to make it public soon. Nancy and Mark were also going to tell Wilma later that evening. I hugged them both and felt better. I had some good news for the first time in a while. A possible new job and a new son-in-law. Work was taking up all my time, which was helpful. I had no time to dwell on my personal misery. I went in early, stumbled home late, and mostly just crashed. Wilma had contacted me a little, but she had mostly left me alone. I had no idea what she was doing, but I was curious. Wilma had called and asked how I was doing. I told her I was swamped, which was normal. She told me her Christmas party was coming up this weekend. She wasn't sure if she would go, but she felt she had to. She said she missed me but was doing a lot of thinking and hoping we would get back together. "This is the first party you won't attend with me," she said. I told her, I know. She also mentioned she was doing Christmas shopping and getting everything ready. Nancy had a lot of nice things, and I told her I would help pay for anything she needed. Wilma thanked me. Then she told me she had to go and would chat later. Interestingly, her mother called me a few minutes later. She was pleasant but firm with me. "Fred, I love you, but I need to speak to you. I prefer it in private, face to face." I told her, "Okay, do you want to see me tomorrow night at 9 o'clock? "No," she replied. "I want to see you now." I dreaded it, but I realized I had to see her. "Okay, I will be there shortly." So I got in my car and proceeded to her home. It was 9:15. I pulled into her driveway. She opened the door and gave me a hug. I told her I was dog-tired, but here I was. We sat in the den, and she told me I needed to talk to Wilma. I understood, but this was a terrible time to meet. I was working long hours and had no free time. Around that time, the door opened, and in walked Wilma. I hadn't seen her since before Thanksgiving. She did look nice, a bit thinner maybe, but my heart still skipped a beat. Then I was angry. Wilma's mom said, "Calm down, dear. This won't take long." Wilma rushed in and grabbed me around the waist, hugging me tight. She got right to the point. "Sweetheart, I know I hurt you deeply, but I wanted to let you know I am trying to get back in your good graces. I met a counselor, and she has helped me start to see the problems. I want you to take me to my Christmas party. Please, I am begging you, and I promise to be good. It's for my job. They like to see couples, and it can help me. Wilma, you know I am working massive hours right now. It's very difficult to get away. Won't it look funny to see me there with you? I'm sure Barney would love to try to humiliate me again. Barney is a jerk. I don't worry about his feelings. I worry about yours. Please, Fred, there's a dinner and a dance. You could leave after dinner, but please give me one dance." "Okay," I said reluctantly. "I'll think about it." She told me when and where the party would be, and I said I would let her know if I could be there. Wilma kissed me, and I told her I had to leave. Her mom kissed me and said, "Please give her another chance. She is lost without you." I said my goodbyes and left. The party was a week from Saturday night at the local Marriott. The reception was at 6 o'clock, dinner at 7 o'clock, and the dance from 8:30 to midnight. I checked my schedule to see if I could stay from 6:30 to 8:30. It looked like it might work out. I had spoken to my attorney, and he had all the paperwork ready whenever I wanted it served. I asked if he had a PI he worked with, and he gave me a number. I contacted Phil, who was a PI and highly recommended by my attorney. I met with him, told him my story, and explained that I had been invited to a dinner and wanted her followed for a few days beforehand. I still wanted out, but to appease my daughter and mother-in-law, I was trying to give Wilma one final chance. Wilma texted me, saying she loved me and couldn't wait to see me in my tux at the dinner. I texted back, "I haven't decided yet." A week went by, and I got a call from Phil. He said he had followed Wilma and watched who she met with. She did go out to lunch with Barney one day, but they acted normal and not romantic. He had stopped by her house one day, but was only there for about 10 minutes. It appeared she had not had any romantic encounters with him that week. He told me he would continue to follow her until Saturday afternoon. I thanked him and hung up. One thing that bothered me was that Barney showed up at my house, even for a few minutes. He was a complete jerk, and I was ready to retaliate. I just had to concentrate for a few more weeks, and then I would be gone. Wilma texted me again, asking if I would pick her up for the party. I told her I would most likely be coming straight from work, and would probably have to meet her there. I also texted and asked if she had seen Barney away from work. She texted back, "No." Then I followed up, "What would he say if I showed up at the party?" She said it didn't matter what he thought. I kept pressing, "What did you talk about when you were together?" She said, "Only work-related things, all business." "So, you haven't been with him since I saw you both?" She said it was over. Well, it was Friday night, and Phil had texted me, asking for me to call ASAP. I was busy, but within 30 minutes, I had a moment. I called him. He told me Wilma was at Barney's house. She had left work and gone there around 5:30. He saw a delivery boy bring a pizza around 6:15. It was now 8:30. I knew that was the final straw. Although I had already decided to leave, this would make it easier. Now I could tell my daughter and mother-in-law that I had tried. I told Phil if he could get any pictures, that would be fine. He said he would try. I was scheduled to close the store at 10 o'clock, and it usually took almost an hour to finish up. I was in turmoil because even if I had been thinking about giving her a chance, it had evaporated. Phil texted me around 11:15. He had some pictures, but they weren't as incriminating as I had hoped. They showed them hugging, but no obvious intimacy. They appeared to stay in the living room, and not in the bedroom. I wondered if I should call Wilma. I decided to at least give her a reason for not attending the party tomorrow night. It rang, then went to voicemail. I left a message for her to call me. A few minutes later, she called and asked if I was okay. I told her, "Something has come up, and I won't be able to attend the party tomorrow night." She sounded disappointed and said she had a new dress and wanted me to see it. I then told her, "I know you were with Barney. Tell him to leave you alone. I hope you're enjoying your time with him." Then I hung up. I went back to my motel, dropped onto the bed, and Phil texted me, saying Wilma had left Barney's right after I called her. Saturday morning was bright and cold. I had slept a little better than I thought I would. I called Nancy and told her I wasn't getting back with her mom because she was still seeing Barney. She was disappointed because her mom had said she hadn't seen him outside of work and never would again. Then I called my mother-in-law and told her the same thing. She was livid and apologized for her daughter's actions. I told her I appreciated all her support over the years and said goodbye. I checked my phone and saw 5 calls and about 10 texts, all from Wilma. She kept explaining that nothing happened between her and Barney. They just had pizza and talked. She repeated it over and over again. I finally texted her back, telling her Barney had won and not to bother me anymore. I would be sending the divorce paperwork on Monday. Back at work, I was still in the same routine, but at least I knew my future was planned. I called Sally at Wilma's work one more time. I thanked her for everything and told her not to tell Wilma I called. I asked about the party, and Sally said Wilma was quiet and mostly stayed with the girls. She danced with a couple of guys and even danced with Barney once, but she didn't look happy. I asked if she said anything about me, and Sally said Wilma mentioned that we were probably getting a divorce, and then started crying. I told Sally thank you and wished her the best for Christmas. Nancy came over that night, and we had a quiet dinner in my motel. We were both down, but I was so happy to see my baby again. She said her mom was very unhappy, and she let her have it about her lifestyle and disrespect toward me. She said her mom cried most of the night. Nancy then told her mom that I had a transfer and would be leaving the area after the first of the year. Wilma cried like a baby and admitted she had been wrong about everything. She had always thought we would get back together. Wilma called and texted repeatedly, asking me not to move. She wanted to see me. I refused. Nancy also said her mom had received the divorce papers. She put them down and hadn't moved them since they arrived. I asked if she would just sign them so we could both move on. Nancy said her mom hated to give up the house but figured she would have to. Well, time moves on. It has been almost 2 years, and I am happy in Savannah. My beautiful daughter is married to Mark and living in Northern Virginia. She loves her job and hopes to start a family in a few years. Wilma sold the home, and I got my half of the proceeds. She initially tried to fight the divorce, but it was a waste of time. She never dated Barney after our split. He had moved on to his next conquest, which also involved a married woman. He eventually lost his job over a harassment complaint. Even Wilma testified against him. Nancy tells me her mom dates occasionally, but is not happy. Her unhappiness keeps her from going out, and she prefers to stay in her condo. She says she made a huge mistake and will never forgive herself for her actions. She says she still loves me, but knows I will never take her back. I refused to meet with her, and my attorney handled everything. I saw her at the wedding, but we stayed apart as much as possible. Wilma sent me a long letter of apology, as her counselor advised, asking for my forgiveness. She wants to visit, but says she will wait for me to invite her. I have started dating again, and I'm taking it slow. I've met some lovely ladies, and I am as happy as I've been since all of this started. Wilma stopped calling after the last time she asked if there was anything she could do to get me back or to earn my forgiveness. I told her, I don't think so. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.